This episode is brought to you by the new book, Round Here and Over Yonder, written by authors Trae Crowder and Corey Ryan Forrester. That's ya boy. The book is out now. I would like to thank everyone who did the pre-order, but for those of you who were like, you know what, I want to wait and actually go to a bookstore and pick this thing up, well, you can do that right now. Round Here and Over Yonder, a front porch travel guide written by two progressive hillbillies. Parenthetical, yes, that's a thing. We love long titles, but we love making you laugh even more. This book is chock full of jokes. We chock-filled it too. It's got a bunch of jokes in it. It's really, really, really fun. We tried to take the stereotypes of certain regions, talk about what they are, talk about what they got right, talk about what the actual reality is. Of course, we did it with our own little region here in the South. We went everywhere else in the United States, and for the first time in our lives, we went to the UK. It's Rednecks Abroad. The book is Round Here and Over Yonder. Not to brag on us, but I will. It is hilarious. Pick it up now wherever you get books. And by the way, we narrated the audio version, if that's how you want to digest it. But there is no wrong way. Round Here and Over Yonder, wherever you get your books. Do it at an indie bookstore. I like that more. Don't tell Amazon, though. Bye.
Hey, look who it is, everybody. Esteemed character actor, W. Earl Brown. Also honorary uncle to the WellRED fellas. Uncle, big brother, whatever the case may be. You've done the show before, but it's been a while.
It's been a few years, yeah.
How you been?
Well, we've had a pandemic since then.
Yeah. Damn, it's been that long.
Things have been great, man. Since the world righted to some degree, I worked constantly up until, we've been on strike for 5 months.
Yeah.
So I've done a bunch of really good stuff that nobody watches.
Right. Yeah. Well, sometimes it'd be like that, but you've done good stuff that people do watch too. I want to talk about your how the strike's been and stuff later, but first, before I forget, I want to ask your advice. I'm going to this like a pretty Hollywoody thing tonight. It's it's like a fundraiser thing. It's through my close personal friend Al Gore, who we were talking about before. Me and him real tight. So he invited me to this thing, and me and Kate are going to, and it's in like Beverly Hills and whatnot. And it's gonna be fancy and swanky, and I always feel out of place. You're from Kentucky. You've been out here a long time. Like, I want any advice you have for those scenarios, but also if you got any patented Earl Brown anecdotes about, big Hollywood parties or soirees or something in your time, run-ins you've had, any of that.
Well, I don't, I don't really make the party circuit all that much. When I first came out here, I cared,
right.
and I did go to the clubs and stuff like that. I've always found if I have a purpose for being at some soiree, like if it's around a show I've done, if it's a premiere or something, I'm fine. I can work. I have a purpose for being there. I'm not really good at just shameless self-promotion for no reason, for no specific target. Like I'm here to work the room.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't have that. I did learn something about Hollywood. And that's funny. We were talking earlier. I've spent the last 4 days with you and Corey because I've been listening to the book Around Here.
Round Here and Over Yonder, available now, everybody.
Walking, running. And I just finished the LA section only about an hour ago. And you were talking about those events and and as a kid, you having this image of Hollywood, and I had the same thing.
Yeah.
And the first time I had that I worked away from home was on Scream. And we shot in Central California, and it was like summer camp, man. Movies are like that. You go away, you meet a new group of people, you have a shared common experience, you make these bonds, and then you go back home and you go on to the next one. Or summer's over, we go back to school.
Yeah, that is kind of the standard out. Like people don't.
Yeah.
I think like regular, just the movie going public or whatever. They see people that co-star in something, they got great chemistry, or especially TV shows, and they think that like. Y'all like hang out and stuff after that and, stay tight, but it's not usually the case, right?
It's rare when it is the case.
Right, which means it's something
special. Well, I learned it on Scream. We had the big red carpet premiere, and there was the buzz on the film because they had tested it and they knew they had a potential hit on their hands.
Oh, yeah.
So we were the hot ticket in town, and I was so excited. Like, I'm going to get to back and hang with my buddies and see my friends. We'll have some beers because we hung out. We partied on Scream because we were all young. Yeah. I was the oldest, and I was 32. And, Courtney is like 6 months younger than me, and the rest of them were in their mid-20s. And when I got to that premiere, it was like the most Hollywood sycophantic ass kissing because it was the hot ticket, and I couldn't even say hello to most of the to Matt or Skeet or Courtney,
right,
because there was such this cacophony around them, and it was so disappointing to me because I'm thinking I'm going to go hang with my buds. It's been 6 months since we all hung out, man. We'll do shots. And then I realized, no, it's a promotion for the film, and it's all ephemeral. It all goes away. And so that's what you just have to take it with a grain of salt. Have fun in the moment when you can. And
those people, man, you'll see them sometimes out here that just like have absolutely zero shame about like going up to somebody like some whatever power broker, gatekeeper, just someone with like a career, and this person they'll just go right up to him and be like, hey, I got this script I've been working on, or let me tell you about this project. I got all this stuff. Like I've been like called into meetings with people like for that purpose, and I still feel weird doing it. You know what I mean? Like let alone just randomly going up to somebody at a coffee shop or something. Like that's crazy to me.
Well, I found that the greatest way to get something that you want is to ask for it. But the key is knowing when to ask, who to ask, and what exactly to ask for. If you go up to somebody that you don't know at a party, well, hey, I got a script. That shit happens all the time. And it's in one ear and out the other. And they're used to that. Of
course.
Now, when you're called in because somebody knows your work, that's a different circumstance.
Yeah, right.
That's like being at a party at a function that, it's celebrating a show that you're a part of. Like I said, when I've got to walk the red carpet for something like that, I'm fine. As long as they ask me questions about the thing that we've created. But just to walk hey, look at me, I don't like that. But when somebody calls you in, they have an interest in something you've created. And they want to see if they can create something else with you and make some money from it.
Sure. Yeah. And I pull it together and do it. I'm just, I'm saying even in that scenario, I feel weird about like, I don't know, trying to sell a concept, like a show idea or something is one thing, but it's always like, oh, you got to sell yourself too.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know that I believe in the product. You know what I mean? But no, it's hard for me to, act like I hit. But
do you still feel that way? After the degree of success that you've had.
Oh yeah,
I get it when
mad imposter syndrome, man, for sure. You don't ever have that anymore. I mean, you shouldn't. But I thought that. I had in my head, I was like, most people feel that. Like it's not like it's perpetual, but like, yeah, do I still get it? Absolutely, all the time.
A lot of people do feel that way. And very successful people. Do I have imposter syndrome as an actor? No.
Right.
There was a moment, I had something early in my career, a play that I did where all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. And I'd kind of had that transcendental experience prior, but I didn't really understand it. I didn't realize how it happened, But in that circumstance, I did. And all the pieces fit. And it not only helped me in my family, deal with family trauma, because I was basically interpreting it on stage. I didn't consciously realize it when we started, but in that moment, I realized, the power of art, the power of creativity. So not only in my career, but in my own personal life. And since that point, like, I'm pretty good at this.
Yeah.
Now, I've had moments like on Seinfeld, I was convinced Larry David was going to fire me, So, there were sweat and bullets there. So every now and then a circumstance will arise where, I step to the plate and I whiff. But
I got an actory question for you, or a question about actors. I feel like there's like two schools of thought with actors when it comes to like, some of them real hardcore, real method, really like, I am that person when I'm doing this. I am that person versus the ones that are like, well, I mean, no, you're not. You're an actor playing that person. But, if you have right. So where are you at on that?
Me personally, or dealing with people like that?
Both.
Well, one circumstance I read of an actor who worked that way, which I could get it. I could see when Phil Hoffman did Capote, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and he said, I've never worked that immersive, method way. But he said, I found that the physicality, he was so physically different from me because I'm a big guy, kind of tall. He was small. And he said, I found it really hard every morning to kind of find that again. So it was easier for me to go home with that mind. That's the one circumstance where I'm like, oh, I could see that. I could see that. There are things that you, like, for example, when I did There's Something About Mary, we had this bit of, I had longer hair and they were cutting my hair and I was in costume, I was in wardrobe, but I would walk to the set so that Pete and Bobby, the Farrelly brothers, could look at my hair and decide how they were going to do it. So I still wasn't 100%, like I couldn't immediately flip that switch off and on with that character yet.
Yeah, and Warren, by the way.
Yeah, Warren.
And there's, I was going to bring that up anyway. I know you talked about it a million times, but I still wanted to, so glad you brought it up.
But there were things, walking down the sidewalk, because our base camp was 2 or 3 blocks away from where we were shooting. And I wasn't shooting that day. I was just there for confabs, for wardrobe and makeup and hair and stuff. But I would walk to set as Warren with that center of balance, with that. 2 times, people crossed the street so they wouldn't pass by me. It made them uncomfortable.
Right.
And that was something like I'd never thought of, that. Like that people would be, but so I did learn something in that circumstance. But then once I had it dialed in, like I could flip it on and off. So no, I don't work that way. There's sometimes you emotionally take shit home with you that you can't wash off,
right?
Not consciously, something that really psychologically bothers you. Like I did that show American Crime in Texas. And I was living by myself, and there was no one else in the apartment complex working on the show, and it was really fucking depressing.
Yeah.
And I played guitar and painted for hours on end because it just messed with me so much. So that was hard to wash off. How do I deal with others who behave that way? The end result is the performance. Yeah. However you got to get there, whatever. I have dealt with like Joaquin Phoenix on The Master. Now, he didn't say, call me by my character name. None of that. He introduced himself as Joaquin. But he stayed in that mindset and that physicality all day.
Right.
So there's no denying that scene between him and Phil Hoffman is one of the greatest scenes on film in that movie.
Yeah, and of course, I heard the story. I don't know if this is true. You might have heard the story too, but like, so Daniel Day-Lewis, like a lot of people consider him greatest living actor, whatever. Yeah. He also does that sort of thing.
Yes.
I heard someone, I can't remember who it was, someone who was like worked behind the scenes on Lincoln, I think. So he's playing President Lincoln, and they texted him something like, yeah, Daniel, call time or whatever tomorrow, right? And he texted back and was like, you will refer to me as President Lincoln or whatever, and which is funny because it's like, okay, I don't think Abe was with Verizon or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so if you care, if he cared enough about that, like getting up and finding her and, being all presidential with his top hat and being like, how dare you refer to me with such,
Well,
but
Tim Nelson tells the story. He was on that film. Well, first of all, when they finished it, I asked John Hawkes, I said, so what was it like working with Daniel? He goes, I don't know. I never met Daniel. I met President Lincoln.
Right. Yeah.
But not long ago, when Tim was promoting his novel a year or so ago, I listened to him on a podcast, and he told the story of when Hal Holbrook joined the cast, and he sees Daniels at craft service, and he goes, Holbrook makes a beeline over to him. Well, hey, Daniel.
Right, and Hal Holbrook's, 90 at that time or something? Like, been around forever, legend of the game.
He said Spielberg cut him off, and he goes, the president is having a snack for the moment, and President Lincoln, and he goes, you see it kind of sink into Hal's face, like, oh, I get it. Okay. And as he turns to walk away, he leans around and he goes, still want to tell you, Danny, you were great in that wheelchair picture. I worked with a young actor on this indie film I've seen him in other films. He's really good. He was good in our film. But me and this, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to start that shit. But me and another actor who was a friend, we had been out rehearsing. And we get back in the van, and this young actor had just joined us. Now, we're all living together in this monastery up in northern Maine. The whole cast and crew, we're all in the same place because we're in the middle of nowhere, right? Mm-hmm. And my friend goes, oh, hey, I heard you were joining. Hey, welcome. And the actor goes, that's not my name. My name is Dave, whatever his character name was. And I started laughing. And he was like 20 years old. And I went, pipe down, Francis.
Yeah.
Which is from Stripes.
Yeah. Is that a specific like type of training that, like, when you meet an actor like that, you're like, oh, I know exactly what kind of training you went? It's just something that some of them find along the way, and they're like,
it's this
that's what I'm going to do.
It's a bastardization of Stanislavski's method.
Yeah, right.
For the Moscow Art Theater at the turn of the century, because theater had always been this presentational thing, and that was the first time they did Gorky's The Lower Depths. And the story was people were afraid. They were afraid to go to the theater, afraid they were going to get lice. Because it was homeless people, like living in a sewer. Mm-hmm. And they created that environment, and they played everything realistically. It wasn't like I'm performing. They wanted to create truth,
Right. And
so
that was weird for theater, especially that far back, right? Because like you said, theater was all very holding a skull on stage, projecting, doing soliloquies, all that stuff, as opposed to like immersive reality.
That was Stanislavski wrote. There were 3 books, and he talks about that method. Well, then a group in New York, the Actors Studio, and Lee Strasberg, and it was kind of a bastardization of that, where it became this. They think they have to totally immerse. And again, all techniques are tools. Mm-hmm. And whatever tool it takes for you to complete the job, you use. When a plumber comes to my house, he doesn't unload every tool off his truck and bring it in. He comes in and sees what the problem is, figure out what tools he needs. So that kind of way of working, it's a tool. You just don't have to be a tool.
Right. Yeah.
Because sometimes it can become a little insufferable.
Sure. Well, I remember my whole thing, like, I've always, I'm not an actor, I'm a comedian, and I've always thought it was, I've always sort of rolled my eyes at it when I've heard about it. And then, like, in particular, I watched, Jim and Andy, right? Jim Carrey's documentary that he put out himself about him doing this to play Andy Kaufman, right? And which I thought was a wild choice in retrospect, because I didn't think it made him look that great. But I guess, kudos to him for, totally owning it. But in that documentary, they also talked to Jerry the King Lawler, right? Who had that old rivalry with Andy Kaufman in real life, went on Letterman, bitch slapped him.
I was watching that live. I watched it when it happened.
Yeah, that was wild.
I completely bought into the kayfabe.
Right, yeah, they did this whole thing. And so that's in the movie Man on the Moon, in which Jim Carrey's playing Andy Kaufman, and Jerry Lawler was involved with the movie as well as being there in real life. And when he was on the movie set, Jim Carrey as Andy Kaufman was like screaming at him, trying to attack him, having to be held back. Get the fuck off my set, like Lawler, all this stuff, whatever. And in the documentary, when they interview Jerry Lawler, he's like, I try to tell him, like,
Andy was in on it.
He was like, we were friends. He was like, we came up with that whole thing together. Like, I knew the real, I was there when it all really happened. He wasn't like that. Like, we were buddies, And to me, that right there, like, that just sort of like summed the whole thing up for me in terms of like, so it's at least a little bit of bullshit, at least taking it to that extreme. Because his whole thing was that he wasn't even doing a method. Yeah. He was literally inhabited by the spirit of Andy Kaufman when he did that role, is what he had said.
Kaufman's one that, I was of that age. I'm your mom's age. And what turned me on to comedy was I had George Carlin's Class Clown, and I had Richard Pryor's Greatest Hits. And then I went back and bought all these other, because Pryor, and they blew my mind, because they said things and thought of things in a way that was so outside of my experience, being a 12-year-old kid growing up in rural Kentucky.
Oh, right.
And so I became a big comedy nerd. I still have this triple album, 25 years of recorded comedy, which were bits from, Avery Schreiber, people all over the course of comedy, including Pryor and Carlin. And then when Kaufman came along, I would have been 14 or so, right when I was really getting into it. And Andy was just so fucking weird.
Oh, yeah.
And I read this, there was this Rolling Stone article, an interview with him. And he said, I don't care if I make people laugh. I'm like, what? You're a comedian. That's the purpose of a clown, is to make people laugh. You're a comedian. And he said, I want people to have an experience that they're not going to forget. So I may enrage them. I may piss them off to no end, and they may storm out, but they're not going to forget it.
Yeah. I don't know how you do that, man. It's so wild to me having the balls, I guess, to do that. Because want them to laugh.
Yeah.
If they don't laugh, I take that pretty hard.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing for me. But
There's no death. I did stand up when I was in college and stuff. There's no death worse than standing up there to crickets.
Indeed. Do you have moments like that as an actor? Is there anything comparable? And I guess not in a theater, like in film or TV production. Like, do you ever? I don't know. You ever have like moments where you're like, oh man, this ain't good.
Oh yeah.
Or this ain't playing or whatever. Yeah.
The thing with
what are you doing that you just buckle down, be professional, and do your thing?
TV film, you get another take.
Yeah.
And you try something different. You try. I did one. I may have told this story before, but I was again. I'm not going to name any names. The guest starring on this show. It was a murder mystery show of sorts that was quite popular in the 80s and early 90s. And I was a guest star on it, and there was this co-star whose family was connected, and she could not act to save her life. And she had mapped out her facial expressions, like literally mapped them out.
What do you mean? Like
she every take she did the same.
Okay.
Every single take, her face exactly the same.
Yeah,
was making faces, right? Yeah. And I'm like, you're not even listening to me.
Yeah.
I'm telling her fiance's been murdered, right? That's the big scene. So I think, well, this is terrible. So I'm going to get one genuine response. So I threw the script out the window. I mean, I've still got to tell her, I changed the blocking. I just knew to find the lens so the camera still sees me, sees the shot that it needs. And it threw her for a loop. She didn't know how to respond.
Right.
And like you might actually respond that way if somebody came up and told you out of the blue that somebody you love has been murdered.
Right.
And the director, old school TV guy, he pulls me aside and he says, Earl, I see what you're doing. Don't worry about it. Just hit the mark, say the line. We'll fix it in editing. And I thought, so that this is shit, right?
Right.
This is terrible. You don't care. We just got to make our day. Now that show it's not exactly Deadwood.
Right.
It wasn't that demanding of its audience of both intellectually and spiritually. It was an easygoing murder mystery show. But that was the first time in my career where I've just kind of felt dirty, There have been others. There have been others come along, and I've gotten to the point that I won't do things like that anymore. The shows themselves just pass.
Right. Yeah. It's all about the choices you make, right?
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have choices.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And my wife went back to work full time 5 years ago now, and she does quite well, so I don't have to worry. I'm a kept man.
There you go. That's what's up. I said earlier I was going to bring up something about Mary. Again, I know you've talked about all this before. Or we've talked about it before, like not on microphones, but like there's something about Mary. You played Warren, right? Like, have you personally gotten any like grief for that since then? Like, if someone remembered, like, oh shit, we need to go after that guy for doing that, or is everybody like? Because I feel like that was very much a no harm, no foul type of situation to me. That like everybody's hearts were in the rap. Like the Fairley brothers, I know the story. There was a real Warren who like they loved that guy.
He was their neighbor growing up,
and it's all love, and you can tell that in the movie. He's not like a punching bag.
He plays Freddie in the film,
right? Yeah. That's right. And so like, to me that one should be treated pretty differently, I would think. But like, have people like taken you to task for that or anything? No. Warren was mentally handicapped. Surely y'all all know that. But
when we did the movie. Again, I'm the only person that played it straight out of the 100 or so people that were auditioned for that. They were seeing comics, and everybody's trying to goof it up, and make it this farcical thing. And I just knew instinctively, if you do that, you're commenting on the character, and you're making fun of the character, and people are gonna fucking hate you. Can I say that on the air?
You say whatever the fuck you want.
And then, secondly, it's not going to be funny if you're trying to make it. The only way to make this funny is to make it human. And make those moments real, which is pretty much how I approach doing comedy, doing anything that I do. So it worked. But, you know, the flip to it is everyone thought I actually was that.
Absolutely.
I thought
that's such a testament to how good of a job you did, because like I was like 14 or whatever when that movie came out. We loved it, obsessed with it, and I think that's another reason why everybody loved that performance so much. Everything is because like none of us questioned it for a second. None of us was like, that's a comedian acting like this. It's like we thought you were head to toe legit.
But that's why it worked. You know, I had an experience in what were we, 03 or 04. I was doing a movie with Robin Williams. And we were talking about the circumstances within the film we were making. And Holly Hunter, playing his wife, character had Tourette's syndrome. We're talking about Tourette's syndrome. And Robin says, sometimes it's tactile that touch something before you look at it. That's Trae. He goes, no. It's some people with Asperger's or with. I recently did a movie with David Duchovny, and I played a character. I said, oh yeah, I understand, because you know I did the same thing in Mary. That if I didn't trust somebody, I would touch them before I would look at them. And he went, what? I said, I did. Something about Mary? Did you? That's you? Oh my God, I called people. So I'm sitting there like, this is one of my heroes. You know, I expected when that movie exploded, I really thought, all right, my bags are packed for the gravy train, baby.
Right, but
you know, because Scream had happened 2 years before, and I was I got billing on Scream, and I'm pretty, you know, it's a main supporting role. I got killed by Ghostface, but I was under no false illusion. Like, I don't bring anything special. I'm good in the part and fine. But the success of that movie got nothing to do with me. Well, Mary, I'm surely not there's a multitude of reasons why that movie was extraordinary.
But you're totally one of them.
Yeah,
though.
but I was part of it. So my bags are packed for the gravy train, thinking, all right, baby, here we go.
Sure.
Here we go. And the gravy train just blows right by me.
Because people didn't
thought,
know. They weren't even looking for the actor who did that, because they didn't think it was an actor.
But you ask if anyone's come after me. Yes, there was an attempt at it on Twitter. A couple of years ago, when Sia, the singer, made that film that received, you know, pretty bad response, somebody was trying to bait me on Twitter. And it was either somebody working PR for that film trying to divert attention away from the portrayal that was in that movie, or I had a stalker fan a stalker fan. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those two. I tend to think it was the stalker trying to bait me into something. I just ignored it. Like, I never responded at all, because there's no winning that. As soon as you walk into it, you've lost. So that one time, and it was an attempt to divert public attention away from that. So
what do you think about that whole larger discussion about representation and everything? Like,
well, using Mary as an example, this was 4 or 5 years afterwards. I was at the Roxy, and this girl recognized me, and she goes, "Hey, are you W. Earl Brown?" Yeah, and we chatted, and she was telling me a story. She said, "I have 2 brothers, and they both have Down syndrome," and said my mom she wanted to see that movie, and I told her, "Mom, I'm not sure if." Because she said this was so out of my mother with an R-rated, so much of the comedy in that. So she said she wanted me to bring over the tape or DVD, I forget what it was. And she said, so I put it on. She goes, that first scene, she goes, my youngest brother, he gets up and he goes walking right to the TV, and he points right at the screen at Warren, and he goes, he's special, he's just like me. And he came back and he sat down. And I said, everybody deserves to see their story told. Everybody.
Yeah, right.
You know, I got part of the courage to do what I do because Leo Burmester went to Western Kentucky University. Leo was like 10 years older than me. He was an actor on Broadway and in movies. Mm-hmm. If you saw The Abyss, you know, he was Catfish. But I always knew, like, oh, well, that's like a big burly country dude, kind of looks like me.
Right.
So everybody deserves that to have their story told, and to be told in an authentic and genuine way. On the flip to that is, everybody thinks acting's just easy. Anybody can do it.
Right.
It's easy.
Yeah.
If it's really, really good, it does appear easy. It appears seamless. You don't see people acting. I believe the best actor to best tell what story needs to be told is always the best choice to make.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, and I get where somebody, Peter Dinklage is not a great dwarf actor. Peter Dinklage is a great actor, period.
Right.
You can put him in any part, and he's extraordinary. I've worked with him. He's an extraordinary actor. So, he's not cornered by his condition, because his talent transcends it.
Right.
And I think that's what the best actor is always my choice.
Well, I'm totally with you on that. I think there should be a line to it. I'm doing a bit about this on stage right now, kind of making fun of the whole thing, because but I do get kind of why people would be annoyed, because anytime I'll see like, and I never even saw this movie, but like that movie on Netflix, The Devil All the Time, I think is what it was called, which is like it's like an Appalachian movie. It's like, white trash hillbilly stuff. I think it's southeastern Ohio, I think is where it's set. Or in like Logan Lucky and all these, which I actually like that movie, but all these other movies where it's like all the rednecks are played by like classically trained Shakespearean Brits. They're played by James Bond or Spider-Man or whoever, and they're doing these like, ridiculous accents and whatnot. I mean, you're like one of the few guys, you and a handful of, your compatriots and buddies are like some of the few guys are like have legitimate, redneck or southern roots or whatever. You're from fucking Murray, bona fides that actually get those roles sometimes, so I got a bit making fun of that, but it's like,
well, I'm
but I'm not blogging about it or nothing. I want to make fun of it,
Well, I kind of feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
And nothing's worse than a bad accent.
Right.
And my ear is pretty well attuned to dialects. And then like my first gig ever on a movie set was coaching Chicago dialect to the Backdraft. I had auditioned for the film, and I heard Ryan, he was wanting this very specific Chicago, Southsider kind of dialect in it. So I walk in a room, I do the whole thing like as I'm talking to him, and Ron goes, well, obviously you're from here.
Yeah.
I went, well, actually, no, I'm from Kentucky. You're from, so I got hired to coach dialect.
That is wild.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Good for you. Well, you just have an ear for it or whatever.
My uncle,
I do with some of them. Like I'm real good at some of them, but like, and if you give me some time, I could probably get there with most of the like white people ones. Well, like that. But are you just one of those people you just hear it and you can just do it? My
uncle moved to Chicago in 1970 or 71, and we'd go up and visit. He lived up there for 3 or 4 years. He was a steel worker on the Sears Tower. So that was the first time I'd heard it, and he married a woman from up there who was very Chicago. And then I went to school there, and DePaul University had bought the Blackstone Theater, and I was one of 3 students who were on the renovation crew, doing blue-collar work, mostly pushing a fucking broom. But all the plumbers and the electricians who were like, local Chicago, hey, actor boy.
Yeah.
So they would mock me, and then so I started mocking them. So that's where I really picked up that. But what it was leading to is that was pretty easy for me, and New York, you get to borough specificity, and there's still things to work on, but a generalized New York thing. And then I was cast in Black Mass, and Boston was not easy for me.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of this cross between those two. And we had a dialect coach, and I worked with her. As we all did. And now there's an example, circling back around to a question you asked, and I can't really slip into it easily right now. The Boston dialect. Yeah. I would sit in my hotel room, read books out loud, and read them in that tongue.
Sure, yeah.
And when I would go out, I'd find myself speaking that because it had to be second nature to me. I couldn't stop and think about, what's the rhythm of this sentence? How should this vowel come out with it? It had to be second nature. And that's what happens oftentimes and because our ears are so attuned to Southernisms.
Yeah, right.
When you hear somebody faking it, when you hear that bad foghorn leghorn, which still exists to a small degree in certain corners of the South.
It is wild. Like, it makes me appreciate. I mean, I'm assuming people from any region can do that because it's like you can just tell. I mean, like if you're actually from the South, you could tell immediately. You're like, okay, this is bullshit. Or if you see somebody doing one that's actually pretty good, I'll like look them up, and be like, where are they from? And then usually they're from Kentucky or Texas or somewhere originally. Like because you can just tell. I wanted. There's something about Mary will you tell the anecdote about the movie awards or whatever?
Oh,
If you don't,
thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Oh. I break into this booze over here as I got to tell him my woe is me. No, it was just
because our buddy Corey, co-host here. By the way, I didn't even tell y'all. Corey's at the dentist and Drew's having a baby, or his wife's having a baby. So that's Earl. Earl's here with just me. But anyway, Corey, he did a thing on the movie awards. He was getting ready for it, and you were like, "I got a story about the movie awards." And then,
well, when I mentioned earlier the thing with Mary, with the success of the film, because I thought, all right, here we go, baby. It's. Here we cracked the code, and then nothing happened. Like nothing.
Yeah.
I think eventually now I'll preface all of this by saying I was belly aching about it, and this was in 2008 or so, 2007. I was belly aching. I was broke and needing a job. And my wife, my wife well, Carrie, she comes in. I was sitting at the table eating breakfast, and she comes in and she goes, "What are you proud of, stuff?" I said, huh? She goes, in your career, what's the thing you're most honored to have been a part of? Was it Deadwood? She went, all right, when did you do Deadwood? I went, what the fuck's this? What? I did the pilot in 02, went to series in 03, came out in 04, lasted 3 years. She goes, yeah, if Mary had taken off the way you think it should have, and it should have, you'd be the fat, goofy guy in broad comedies. You never would have played Dan Doherty in Deadwood.
Yeah.
And
it's probably true.
And no, it's absolutely true. And that was a real come to Jesus moment for me because she was right. I wouldn't trade that experience, those 3.5 years working with David Milch and that group of people, and wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah.
It was transcendent in every which way. I came away a different person from it. But back to Mary. Yeah, the movie awards, I'd always heard when you come into the industry, there were 2 award shows that were fun. It was the Golden Globes and the MTVs because there were open bar. There were parties. And especially when I was younger, I loved to party. I never did cocaine because I didn't need cocaine. I didn't need nothing to get me up, baby.
Yeah.
Any excuse to have a good time.
Also, the 90s, like when Mary comes out, the late 90s, the movie awards were also like, they were huge.
Oh, yeah. Big deal.
Hugely culturally relevant. Mike Myers, I mean, I looked forward to it all year long every year. Big numbers, like huge moments you still remember. So it's a big thing.
Well,
big movie, big moment, all that.
This was a big lesson.
Yeah.
A big life lesson, a big showbiz lesson. I mentioned earlier about this being ephemeral, or just being, it's smoke that just wasps and dissipates into the air. Such as success and fame and all of that shit. So don't put any stock and trade into it. But with Mary, because the kids would vote on the movies, and Mary was nominated for everything. Every award. Well, the best movie segment, now for best movie, something about Mary. And they'd show 30 seconds of clips from the film. They were pretty much all scenes of Warren.
Yeah, right.
Because Ben and Cameron, they were all nominated. Best actress, Cameron. So they showed Cameron Diaz in that. And then Ben Stiller in this, and this, that, and the other. So there wasn't a whole lot left for best picture. So it was mostly clips of Warren. Well, I didn't get invited. And it was here in L.A. Mm-hmm. So I have a friend that used to work at MTV. She used to work for the head of talent. So Jane, she says, well, here's the number. Call them. That's got to be an oversight. So I call New York. I get her new assistant, and I said, hey, oh, that's got to be a mistake. Look, I'll take care of it. I'll get back to you. What's your number? She calls me back about 30 minutes later. Completely different tone of voice. Earl, yeah, look, I spoke with my there's a really long waiting list. It's very popular, and so I'm gonna put your name on the list. You're on the you'll be on the waiting list. But it's. I said, well, so hang on a second. So you're telling me I'm not gonna get it? No. Well, you'll be on the waiting list, but you're also telling me it's really, really long. I'm not gonna get to go. Well, and I said, so I'm good enough to be the whole best picture clips. All 30 seconds are clips of Warren. But I'm not good enough to go to your fucking party? Mm-hmm. I just want to go to the party. I just want to go. Well, now I'm going to put you on the list. Well, so I didn't get to go. Then the dog was there.
Yeah.
I'm watching it.
Right.
and there's all the people from the movie. There's everybody except me.
Yeah.
And the fucking dog was there.
Yeah. Didn't they give the dog like a bit or something?
The dog did have a bit. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
So I was the only person cut out.
That's so funny, man.
Yeah. So that was a huge blow to my ego, man.
Yeah.
It still sort of hurts my fucking feelings.
Sorry. I just remember when you told us that, like, you did it, like, you told us that night and you got to the end, you sort of paused for a minute and you're like, fucking dog was there. Dog had a bit, I brought that up this weekend to my buddy Travis because he was with me in Ohio and he was there hanging out that night and he remembered that too. Like, as soon as I said it, I was like, dog was there. He was like, dog had a bit. Like,
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yep.
Holy shit. Why? So people, like, how many monsters are there in this industry? And I don't mean like Weinstein, really. I mean like on-set monsters, because I feel like it's a huge stereotype. These people are all divas. They're so hard to deal with or whatever. But like the few people that I've like actually had run-ins with or been around are usually pretty lovely in my experience, but I know that they do exist, right? Has that become less of a thing now that with social media and now people know you're a huge dick, or like...
They're few and far between.
Yeah.
Even through the course of, I've done 150 some odd different shows and movies, different titles, not just number of episodes on a show, but I've been doing this for 32 years now that I've been a full-time actor. So I've done a lot of stuff. Luckily, a few of them. I'm not going to name them on this. Mm-hmm. I've run into some real dicks, some real divas who are every Hollywood stereotype, but they're few and far between.
But how do you pull that off? Like, you have to be like, preternaturally talented to pull that off,
or like, really beautiful.
Yeah, right. Okay.
If you're really beautiful, the degree of talent required lowers.
Yeah, it's like a scale. Yeah, right.
Yeah. For every horrible person, I've worked with Robin Williams, who was an absolute delight, who was one of my heroes, who I spent time with, chatting, one-on-one. And Robin was one of those, he wore the mask 90% of the time. He was always performing, always trying to make people laugh, make people feel comfortable. But every now and again, the mask would drop and you'd meet the real person, I became really close with Chris Christopherson, somebody that my mother and my sister and my wife and my daughter have all had crushes on at various points. So that was one of those pinch me moments. We did the film. We did a Western together before, and then we did the movie Bloodworth, which
wrote.
I wrote. I adapted the book, Provinces of Night by William Gay. Highly recommend William Gay to any readers. And
did you read this book and then you were like, this would make a great movie, and then you went and like secured the rights to the book yourself and all that, like on spec, like you...
The kid was my Holden Caulfield. I remember reading Holden Caulfield and, Catcher in the Rye in college. And first of all, I didn't get the satire part that he was intending on the way he grew up. I just thought, what a fucking dick. This character's such an asshole. Because, I see myself. I didn't see myself in it. And then when I read Provinces of Night, like, nope, that character, that's my Holden Caulfield, because that was me at that age. So Shane Taylor, my friend, he had made one small movie that won a bunch of awards, and I gave him the book, and he's same thing. He was still working for ESPN then, and he was flying between gigs, and he read about half of it as soon as he landed. He called me and he goes, "Can we get the rights to this?" So that was the beginning, and we got that in 2005. So, it was a 4-year journey. Right. And then 6 years from the time it actually got released.
See, that's what, I've talked about it before on here. We probably talked about it the last time you were on, but, like, people don't realize, like, how, like, the crapshoot that getting anything made is, and, like, how the vast majority of things just never, ever get made. And then even a lot of the things that do... they take years and years, and people don't know that. And it was like, especially I'm from middle of nowhere, like I sold some of those pilots, and it's in like it's in the trades and stuff. ABC orders Trey Crowder pilot or whatever. And so people see that and they're like, Trey's going to have a show on ABC or on Fox or whatever. And that happened multiple times. And they see me like, whatever happened with that? And I'm like, the same thing that happens with almost all of them, man. Like, because people, but how would they know? They wouldn't know. But it's like, it's mostly failure, moves at a glacial pace. And it's like a demoralizing slog in a lot of ways, trying to get anything made.
I was asked something years ago, I was doing this Q&A for a group of college kids. They were recent graduates of North Carolina School for the Arts, most of them budding behind the camera folks. And the one kid on the front row, he was dressed in a suit and tie, like he was on point. And he said, Mr. Brown, how can I best prepare myself for a career here in Hollywood? And thought came to me full formed. I've repeated it dozens of times since, and it's still great wisdom to be passed along to future generations. But as I said to this enterprising young man, I said, well, you really want a career in show business? Absolutely. All my life I've loved movies. That's all I've wanted to do. I said, okay, well, a career as an artist. You'll need some help to prepare yourself. You'll need like 10 or 12 of your buddies. Ask them to come over and help you out. And then you line all 10 of them up. And then you stand facing them with your back to the wall, spread your legs ever so slightly, and have each of them kick you in the nuts as hard as they can. If you get through all 10 or 12 of them without being in a ball of tears on the floor crying for mercy, you're ready to get started.
Right.
So, but that's what it is. You pour your heart and soul into creating something, and then you put it out there to the universe, and I mean, I still find myself living by this. It's got to satisfy your soul. Mm-hmm. It's got to satisfy your spirit, because that can't be taken away from you. All the rest of it, it's about ego, And if your ego's on the line and you live solely by your ego, you're going to really get fucking tromped on. And what I can't, because, I've read some of the stuff that you've written. And what gets me about this industry, and I've run into this in projects I've been involved in, that, oh man, you've got such a distinct point of view. You are so funny. I'm watching those videos. You're so smart. I mean, you're smart. Right. Like, so look, we want to develop a show with you. And then they take everything that makes you distinct and they want to sand those rough edges off.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then they want to make it as mainstream. And, I did a pilot years ago. I know I've told this story on one of the podcasts because I remember telling it. But I was doing the comedy. We're doing the American remake of The Vicar of Dibley, an English comedy about this small town in England with this vicar who comes back, a woman who's a priest, but it's the church she grew up in, but she had a wild child and went away, who ends up, by twist of fate, being back in her, like if you went back to Salina and you were the preacher of the First Baptist Church and you were a woman, that's kind of the circumstance.
Right. Gotcha.
So it was Kirstie Alley was the lead in it. But we had this young exec who we had at lunch beforehand, and he says, what we're doing here is we're creating a show for the flyover states. He literally said that. Mm-hmm. I know you've talked about it in your book, but there was this condescending attitude toward it, right? And so they changed we were set in the South. They moved it to Kansas because they thought, well, Southern might be too regionalized.
A little too much. Yeah, a little too dumb.
Like there ain't rednecks in Kansas, right?
Right, yeah.
So, we're there, we're rehearsing. There's a song where the town prig who controls the money, he's listening to the Farm Futures on the radio, is what it says. An upbeat song comes on. He starts to tap his pencil. He can't help himself. He gets up and starts to dance around the room. Right as Kirstie Alley walks in and she finds him dancing.
Right.
So that was what was written. They were using a Rolling Stones song. Like, you're not going to afford that.
Yeah, it's just a stand-in.
Well, they... the show creator said, we got to find something, knowing that I play music and I'm a big music fan. And I said, something, I played them Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy, which is a party song. It's a frat boy party song, but it's got twang. And I know those guys, Kenny and John. So they loved it. Love the song. So the next day we have rehearsal and that exec comes in, the flyover guy. And we're watching the scene. He's watching it, and he turns and he goes, "What is this?" Mm-hmm. And she goes, "What?" He goes, "This music. What is this?" Like this, completely dismissive. And she goes, "They're friends of his." Points at me, and he turns to me and he goes, "Look, I understand." He's got a fucking flipped up collar. I shit you not, flipped up collar. He says, "I understand comedy. Okay, now." You know what this needs? This needs a Prince song. A Prince song. And the show creator, she said, but he's listening to the Bean Futures on the radio.
Yeah.
He's yeah. He goes, look, I understand this. He turns to me and he goes, the audience, they're not expecting a Prince song. So when Prince comes on, that's where comedy lies.
That's comedy.
Yeah. I mean, what's this? And I said, this is Big and Rich. Huh? I said, yeah, this song is, well, it's about 5 years old now, but it's still the #1 catalog song on country radio. This song was T-shirts and bumper stickers and caps and license plates and ashtrays in every Walmart in the country for about 6 or 9 months back then. Who? He said, Big and Rich. Were they on the cover of Entertainment Weekly? I said, yeah, them with Gretchen Wilson. Yeah, the 3 of them were. Oh, and then he changes the subject. And I thought, you pompous prick. You are condescending. You're making a show about a culture you're condescending toward, and you're completely ignorant of.
Right.
But comedy. So we face that kind of shit all the time.
Yeah.
And
it's so weird. It's like those people like that you're talking about, like they get, some of them, purportedly are great and everything. They have an eye for talent and know how to let talent do its thing or whatever, which is what they should do. But so many of them, though, are like that. And it's weird because it's like, they don't do the thing. Like, they just managed to get this job because they got the right assistantship because they knew the right person or went to the right school or whatever, you name it. And then now, a few years later, they're elevated to this position where they're like making all these like $1 million decisions that affect people's whole careers and stuff. With no like real basis of expertise on the subject matter or any of it, and it's just the way it's always worked, and it's so weird. It's like lately with the strikes and like, like trying to replace writers and eventually actors with AI and stuff, and it's like, shouldn't we be replacing y'all with AI? Like you just make math. A computer could do what you do way easier than they could do it like we do, right? But that's just how the game goes. They got the checkbooks, so it just is what it is.
Just like earlier talking about prickish divas actors, who behave that way. I've found that most of the execs, it's the same way. Most of them are decent people. Yeah. Trying to do their job, trying to create something that's going to be a hit and make some money. And then you run into those guys. And so much of it is having to justify their position and their salary. Like, man, this really works. But if I don't give notes, they're going to think I'm needed.
Oh, that too. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. You got
to Prince song because I understand comedy.
Right. You got to justify your seat at the table or whatever.
There was one of those. I almost got fired from Something About Mary. I found out afterwards. The first few days of filming because I was too real. It's like it's uncomfortable to watch. It was the scene where me and Ben, where I throw him, spin him around, he touches my ears, That's very uncomfortable to watch. And the Fairley goes, no, trust. It works in the context of the whole thing. So that guy, whose name I still remember him not mentioning, made his whole fucking career because he oversaw our movie.
Right.
And I don't know about the rest of the movie, but I do know he wanted to replace me. And then he ends up, he was wrong, and the movie was a success, and his entire career was built on it. Yeah. And so
be wrapping up soon. We're coming up on about an hour. Thanks. I was going to ask you if you had anything to plug, but I get you're not even allowed to.
I'm not supposed to plug.
Yeah, I realize like you're not allowed to.
Well, the only thing I have
SAG strike is still going on. So.
The thing I have coming up is completely independent, and it's not under that agreement. So I guess I can talk about that. I did the Shirley Chisholm biopic with Regina King, and John Ridley wrote and directed it, and I play Alabama Governor George Wallace.
Nice.
Yeah. So that'll be coming out sometime later this year.
Did you know? You just reminded me. The current governor of Alabama, Kay Ivey, is the first woman to be elected governor of like a deep South state who wasn't succeeding her husband. Meaning that like there had been a couple women before, but they were only like George Wallace's wife got elected governor of Alabama because they had term limits, and everybody was like, yeah, just vote for my wife. She'll make the decisions, And they're like, you got it, George. And I thought that was funny.
Well, I have, one thing I recur on the show Hacks. Speaking of stand-up comedy.
Great show.
So I have an episode of that to do for season 3. So hopefully we'll get this strike resolved soon. WGA is resolved.
I'm about to say that's the rumblings. Yeah, it's like unless
that
it falls
set the
apart,
template.
Writers Guild is good, and SAG should be coming soon, right? So like hopefully it's about done.
Yeah,
you can get
but that's
back to
what
work.
they knew on the other side of the table. This is the template for what we're going to have to deal with the other unions.
Right.
So whatever they decided upon there, they had to make sure it was copacetic to give a similar deal. So yeah, and hopefully we'll come out with a lot of gains because when I started doing this, I've raised my family. This is all I've done.
Yeah,
for
right.
32 years, writing. I made some money acting and a little bit of money with music. It's all I've done, and now it's not really. Easy is the wrong word. It's much more difficult for a young actor in my category now to come out and to be able to live at the level that I have.
You're like a working actor.
Yeah,
because people think about that. They hear about this. They just picture like Matt Damon and them, like A-list stars. But it's like there's huge numbers of like working actors, like you've been one for 30 years. That are just like making a living, supporting a family, just having a just a job and a career. You're not in a super mansion in the Palisades or whatever and living large. You're just doing what you love and, making a living at it. And those people are getting massively screwed over.
When I started,
more so.
it was, I think it was $2,500 that if you got your benefits. Mm-hmm. So, people could have, you couldn't live on that, of course.
Right.
But that was people's career. So if you had to go get a job bartending or, another job and they couldn't work with you, well, you could leave that job because my career, which there's a foundation here that takes care of me, insurance-wise, pension-wise and whatnot. So you still felt like that's accurate. Well, now it's $27,000.
Yeah, right.
That an actor has to make to qualify for level 1 of insurance coverage.
Yeah.
And before, like if you got a guest star on a network show, you'd get paid, and then it re-airs, and you got paid essentially. I forget what the percentage was, a pretty good chunk. So you could count on if you got a guest star on CSI. Well, I got my insurance. That ain't the case.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of those.
It does. Well, hopefully they'll get it figured out. Thank you for helping me figure this out coming in at the last minute because the fellas had issues going on. Hey, y'all, listen, go to TraeCrowder.com, get your tickets, come see me. I'll be in Lexington Friday, and then next week the week after that I'm in Washington State, and then a bunch of places coming up. So, yeah.
You're Lexington, Kentucky next weekend?
Yeah. I was supposed to be there months ago or weeks ago, but the theater that I'm doing failed a business or a building inspection the morning of the show.
Yeah.
And they were like, it's not safe to see people in that balcony, so we had to cancel it. Well, now it's happening Friday. So I reckon they fixed the building. Fret not. Good people of Lexington. I don't think you'll, plummet to your death in a pile of rubble at my show. Hey, you're not going to. It's going to be fine. It's going to be good. They wouldn't let us in there if it wasn't good to go. So, yeah. TraeCrowder.com. That's also where you can get Round Here and Over Yonder. As Earl mentioned earlier, you can find a link to it on there. And that'll do it, though. Thank you all for listening to the WellRED Show. We'd love to stick around longer, but we got to go. Tune in next week if you got nothing to do. Thank you, God bless you. Good night and skew. Almost forgot the word bless. All right, see you. Thanks, Earl.
This episode is brought to you by the new book, Round Here and Over Yonder, written by authors Trae Crowder and Corey Ryan Forrester. That's ya boy. The book is out now. I would like to thank everyone who did the pre-order, but for those of you who were like, you know what, I want to wait and actually go to a bookstore and pick this thing up, well, you can do that right now. Round Here and Over Yonder, a front porch travel guide written by two progressive hillbillies. Parenthetical, yes, that's a thing. We love long titles, but we love making you laugh even more. This book is chock full of jokes. We chock-filled it too. It's got a bunch of jokes in it. It's really, really, really fun. We tried to take the stereotypes of certain regions, talk about what they are, talk about what they got right, talk about what the actual reality is. Of course, we did it with our own little region here in the South. We went everywhere else in the United States, and for the first time in our lives, we went to the UK. It's Rednecks Abroad. The book is Round Here and Over Yonder. Not to brag on us, but I will. It is hilarious. Pick it up now wherever you get books. And by the way, we narrated the audio version, if that's how you want to digest it. But there is no wrong way. Round Here and Over Yonder, wherever you get your books. Do it at an indie bookstore. I like that more. Don't tell Amazon, though. Bye.